three different occasions, we have allowed our foreign policy to be dictated by domestic considerations. Tista, Bangladesh, the border agreement with Bangladesh is number 2, and the UN vote on Sri Lanka, right? How on earth can we then say we should not let domestic compulsions affect our relationship with Pakistan? Why are we being so hypocritical? Domestic compulsions affected our handling of these three issues. Can we have an honest answer from this house? How can you have one approach when it comes to domestic compulsions with some neighbors, but on Pakistan, I want to know which prism we are looking at the whole issue through. Do we have interjections of Mr. Brahma Chelani was accused of, I think, pugilism and over-aggression by the young man on the other side? Would like to respond to it.
When India was weak economically in the 1970s and 1980s, no neighbor of India would dare to mess with India, right? How is it that today, when we are so much stronger economically and also militarily, that small neighbors and the two known adversaries have stepped up their pressures on India? Why? And again, it's a structural issue. It's not who is in government today. Many countries are pursuing strategies pivoted on balance of power or balance of interest or balance of threat. Our foreign policy is not organized on the basis of any distinct strategic doctrine. Now, if you look at any successful company in the world, it has clear strategic goals. What is China's main strategic goal? To be number one, both in soft power and in hard power. What is America's number one goal strategically? To remain the world's preeminent power. Now, if somebody were to ask you, or ask anybody, any Indian, what is India's overarching strategic aim today? What would you say? Actually, the best description of India comes from India's tourism ad campaign slogan, Incredible India. India is incredible in every respect. It is the only important democracy in the world with no defined foreign policy, no articulated defense policy, no declared counterterrorism policy, and no enunciated national security strategy. In other words, India is incredible in every sense. Now, if India wants to be a world power, it'll have to transform itself from being incredible India to being a credible India. We need a credible India.
Okay. Soradeep is responding. Soradeep, well said, Soradeep.
And for that, you need credible leadership too.
Exactly.
That's equally important, credible India.
Which is not tired or retired.
Sir, Dr. Chelani, if I were to look at the geopolitical situation currently, what I would say India's broad foreign policy goal is to recognize the constraints we function under and then develop as many pragmatic strategic relationships as we can so that although we may not compete against China and USA in terms of numbers, we can compete with them in terms of being better off as being Indians as opposed to being Chinese or Americans. And that I say in terms of living in a democracy, working with all the constraints and still managing to debate the issue on the floor of this house and managing to say that we are still better, at a certain stage economically, that we can care for
audience questions. The first audience question from Dhempi College is Kanchana. I think she's here. Kanchana has a question.
Sir, India is a huge, huge market for companies in the defense sector. That puts us in a very good bargaining position. My question to you is, take for example MMRC, Rafale deal and all. Why is it that it is not going anywhere? Why is it that, isn't it a foreign policy failure because we are not able to guarantee our national security in the military sense? What is your response to that?
Well, the response is constrained because I'm in government, but in the February of 2011, I had written a piece for one of the newspapers making a very persuasive case for opening up the Indian defense industry. And as we speak, I think we have taken baby steps in that direction. As of today, there is foreign direct investment, 26% plus, which means all the way up to 100%, which is allowed with CCS approval. And the classical case in point is the collaboration with Russia on the BrahMos missile program, where the Russians have 49% equity in that program. So therefore, I think you're right. There is a strong case for building an indigenous defense manufacturing infrastructure, which is not only able to absorb India's creative potential, create a manufacturing base, but more importantly, allow us to punch to our weight.
Right. And next audience question from Josh Prakash Majumdar from Jadavpur University.
My question is specifically to Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad. Sir, you had a heated discussion with Shoradeep with the domestic politics in Bangladesh. And you said that India has to become a regional power to become a superpower one day. Now, my question is, if I talk about India's foreign policy in recent times, I have to talk about UPA's foreign policy. Now, sir, India has been for 1 decade or 2 decades in a coalition government. Now, we see this uprising of regional parties, and regional parties are interfering with national policies and also international policies. But they have no stake in national matters, forget about international matters. So, sir, the UPA government has suffered criticism from the NDA. Now, my question to you is, if the NDA had to take a stance, what would your stance be in the debate between federalism and national interest? Because if you follow a federal policy, you have to give the states importance, but your national interest will suffer. Now, if you go into national interest, then you have to ignore the states and go ahead.
I think your presumption is wrong, because there is an assumption underlying your query that those who are regional powers are not concerned about national interest. That is a very, very wrong assumption to make. But having said that, I'm willing to go the extra mile with you, that in the case of many regional political parties, their state interests become important. But after all, persuasion, dialogue, consensus is a part of democracy. And the leadership does play a role.
So did I just hear you? Are you dodging the question? Are you dodging the question?
No, I'm not dodging the question at all. I'm only saying...
if you had Mamta as an ally and if you had Jayalalitha as an ally, they took a certain position, you'd break off with them?
No, I would tell you, since you asked me this question, let me be very specific to you. In the parliament, many of the parties from Tamil Nadu rise and say, please declare Sri Lanka as an enemy country. We stand up, I stood up and say, no, Sri Lanka is not an enemy country. There are issues we have to address. This is how you take a position. Surely in the case of the treaty with Bangladesh also you mentioned about, we have taken that position that India's concerns need to be addressed. But a larger issue which you said, that federal principle and national interest are coming in the way, sorry, I don't think.
Okay. I'm going to the young man in the last row, please. Yes, go ahead.
So Mr. Tiwari said that we need to get along with our neighbors. But it's safe to assume that till the time Kashmir is on the map of India, Pakistan will be in no mood to get along with India. So do you not think that a soft policy towards Pakistan and the disparity between our statements and our actions, when we say that we have no regular business with Pakistan but then go on to have a bilateral meeting with them, allows Pakistan to use it to the strategic advantage in terms of exporting terror and continuing to violate ceasefire agreements along the LOC?
While the 1998 Pokhran tests worked to a strategic advantage, and I think the NDA government did well by carrying out those tests, but the reality is that it froze the power balance in South Asia into perpetuity. Pakistan first tried to exploit that nuclear shield by attempting an intrusion in Kargil. They were foiled. And subsequently, there has been this continuous export of terror. The reality is that is a situation which we have to live with, which we have to surmount, and which we have to deal with. And if you look at it in a perspective between 2005 and 2013, I can go even further back, the fact is that notwithstanding the Mumbai outrage, which was reprehensible, by and by, we have been able to contain the designs of Pakistan by limiting the damage which they have been able to inflict on India. And I don't want to go into the issue of counter damage.
Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad wanted to respond.
Nawaz Sharif is the Prime Minister. His own younger brother Shahbaz Sharif is the Chief Minister of Punjab. And the government of Punjab is giving fund to Jamaat Dawa, which is nothing but the benign name of Lashkar-e-Taiba. Mr. Hafiz Saeed holds a big rally in the Gaddafi Stadium of Lahore, where all the anti-India utterances are made in the most virulent form. Why could not Government of India tell Nawaz Sharif point blank that unless your brother, who is not a military man, stops this funding, no engagement will be possible? I think this could have been done just
Fairly
2 days
pointed.
ago, 3 days ago.
Fairly pointed.
Ravi, with all due respects to you, you are deputy leader of the opposition in the Rajya Sabha. How do you presume that it wasn't said? And the second thing which I want to tell you, which is equally interesting,
you mean
is...
to say that despite that message being conveyed, and despite
Allow me to complete,
that
Mr.
message
Chelani.
being
Allow me to
spurned,
complete.
Despite that message
Allow
being
me to
spurned.
complete. Allow me to
Despite
complete.
that message being spurned, we proceeded with the summit meeting.
Allow me to complete. The
I mean, this is really an amazing statement.
The fact is that messages to Pakistan or messages to any country in diplomatic parlance go out at multiple levels. And the point that you made, about why don't we deal with Pakistan in the manner in which Pakistan deals with us, or deal with China in the manner in which Pakistan is dealing with us, the short response to that is that India does not believe in exporting terror. And
Who asked
India
you?
does not
No,
believe
sorry.
in non-proliferation.
This is a very
So
unfair
therefore, the
reply.
implicit
No.
subtext of your question
No, I
is
think
absolutely
very
erroneous.
unfair
And now
Mr. Tiwari,
coming
Maruf
back...
wants to make a point from the chair.
Maruf
wants to make a point from the chair.
That was the implicit subtext of the
Maruf, please,
question.
one second. Let's
Come
listen.
on,
Let's-
this is an absurd reply. I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Tiwari,
Manish.
Come on, but that
Mr.
is a
Tiwari and
subtext
Mr.
of your
Chelani.
question.
This is, you're just top of the head.
No, but what did you mean by saying that we should deal with China in the manner in which Pakistan deals with us?
Well, let me answer that.
So
Let
therefore,
me just answer that.
Either you should have amplified on that.
Diplomacy can be only effective if it's backed up by economic and political leverage. That's a very basic premise on which diplomacy is founded. And an assertive diplomacy does not mean using terrorism as a tool of statecraft. For heaven's sake, I did not say, India should repay Pakistan in the same coin. There are multiple ways.
Chelani.
One minute. There are multiple ways for India to exercise leverage vis-a-vis Pakistan. Unfortunately,
I would like Maruf to come in at this stage. This debate, otherwise it'll be a bilateral exchange.
But if I could just make one last point, Maruf, just one last point. There's a tendency in India for people to think at two extremes. It's either appeasement or all-out war. And I think this tendency in India to think only at extremes snuffs out all the possible options in between.
Right.
And we should stop thinking in extremist lines.
Right.
These are not just two options that we have. There are more than 100 options in between that we have to explore and pursue.
Mr. Chelani, Maruf.
Mr. Tiwari, I just want to sort of further take up to Brahma's point, and that is that if you think Pakistan only exports terror, then clearly you also by inference admit that Pakistan is the epicenter of terror, and therefore there is no other room for diplomatic talks or maneuver with Pakistan. So why are you talking to Pakistan?
Well, I think the answer to that is very clear. Jamaatul Dawa was designated as a terrorist entity at the instance of India by the United Nations after 26/11. The reality is also that there are elements in Pakistan and responsible elements not only in civil society but in the democratic mainstream who do not believe in the policies which are being pursued by the establishment. So therefore, your engagement with Pakistan essentially will have to be at multiple levels. At one level, there would have to be an engagement in terms of trade and commerce. At another level, you will also have to put in place measures, which of course any government does, to ensure that non-state actors or non-state actors who are supported by elements of the Pakistani establishment do not continue with the activities they are. And let me assure you, and you are aware of that since you're the strategic editor of Times now, that all these instruments in the diplomatic kit bag are being utilized.
Are we punching below our weight is the question Maruf raises, taking off from what Brahma Chelani said. Tehmi, your closing comments.
Definitely we're punching below our weight, far below our weight, as I would like to put it, is because as we previously discussed, there are many layers to diplomatic engagement, and I do not see the reason why, considering our history with the NDA government and Kargil, our prime ministers have talks and Pakistan brazenly ignores them and goes on with its terrorist activities. Why does our prime minister need to engage with the Pakistani prime minister? Why doesn't this happen on other levels? Yep. Because the Pakistani prime minister comes out with things like saying, I've even discussed Balochistan, that's tender topic for India, but then India fails to get any response from Pakistan at all.
How many of us at the end of this debate believe that our foreign policy is in line with our global aspirations? As in against the motion? That's a tiny majority. How many of you believe that it's not in line with our global aspirations? I hope everyone on the other side, including the minister and all the other speakers, take that voice back with them. Thank you very much for joining us on this Youth Parliament. Thank you very much indeed.